They get there we go. You see, it's a threat. It's just the threat of speaking without. So my name's Steve Cousins, and are we coming off of this mic? All right, I'm going to stand near this mic. And I'm the CEO of Savioke. I was formerly the CEO of Willow Garage, and we built a robot that I won't talk about, but I want to just allude to, which was a robot that was about a few hundred pounds, so the same weight as the Nightscope robot, and had 2 arms, and was able to do things like open up a refrigerator, get you a beer, and drive it to you. And I mention it because the thing that's driving us in building this robot is a deep desire to put a robot out in the world, right? To put a robot out in the world that can actually make a difference, that can do something useful for people, but at a cost that they can afford. Because like the Romeo, the PR2 robot that we built at Willow Garage was also over $250,000 and simply wasn't going to go into the home. So this robot is the first robot delivery system for hotels, and it's a managed service that we're offering to really improve the operations and the guest experience. So let me give you a little sense. But before I do that, I want to just tell you, it's not just me. There's a whole team of us building this robot. There's about 15 of us now putting this together. And I'll give you a little bit of a very brief history of the robots that came before. Now, this robot on the right I kind of pasted it in here because our industrial designer, Adrian Canoso, was a great sport. We said, we're building this robot. We want to make sure we got the size right. I want to put it out in the field. We have to cover it somehow. And I asked him, how are we going to cover it? And it's expensive to put plastics together. And I said, well, how about spandex? And he put spandex on there, and you can see that it looks kind of anorexic. And so we got rid of that. And this was actually the previous prototype to the one that you're seeing on stage now. One of the things I'll say is we spent a lot of time thinking about design. We spent a lot of time thinking about, should this robot be humanoid? Should it have arms? And a couple of principles drove us. One was we want to have the minimum product, the simplest, the least expensive product we can that can actually do real useful work. So we wanted to do, be able to bring somebody a bottle of water or deliver something in a hotel or deliver things in other environments. And we wanted to do it in a way that is pleasing in the design, but not necessarily humanoid. So this is a quick video of Savvy 1, just to give you a sense of what it looks like in the hotel. It comes to the door, makes a delivery. When you open up the door, it detects that the door was opened, and it opens its lid for you. This is just quick clips. I'll take you through the whole scenario in a little bit. But you can get a towel out of it. You can get a water bottle, whatever is appropriate in a hotel. Actually, one of the things you should know is if you're at a hotel and you forgot your cell phone charger, they almost always will send you one. They stock all these things down below. I never quite realized that. So this is a quick overview of the product. When we looked at, we're a year-old company. When we looked at how are we going to come out into the market, we had this deep passion. We had a team of people from Willow Garage who said, we want to create a new startup. We want to create a new robot. We want to make a positive impact on the world. We want to bring value to people. And we're guided by a vision of, down the road, creating robots to help people with disabilities. But we needed to do something simple that we could do now. We looked at the world of robots. There's about 10 million Roombas, maybe 12 million now, or other vacuum cleaners in homes. There's about 2 million industrial robot arms. They're really different, right? And it raises this question. Actually, you get a really nice sense tonight of what is a robot. So you have a big robot that goes outdoors and patrols. You have a small robot that goes indoors and rides elevators and delivers things. You have smaller robots that can interact with people and are designed to, for education and training. But of all the robots in the world, there's about 0 million besides those Roombas and those factories, right? There's 10,000 now, but that's still 0 million, right? And so we saw this opportunity in the middle between homes and factories and said, look at all of these industries, hospitals, hotels, offices, airports, restaurants, elder care, all these places where there could be robots, where there's an opportunity, and how do we come out into that world and provide some value. We had studied robots with 2 arms and what they could do, 1 arm, what you could do with a 1-armed robot, half an arm, if you will, a robot that could actually pick things up like a mini forklift and drive them around at Willow Garage. And we realized that of all the things we had brainstormed about and studied, that this delivery application was really the simplest one. And so that's what we went after. The cost issue matters a lot, and I wanted to just say, we owe a lot of debt of gratitude to the ROS system, ROS.org, run by the Open Source Robotics Foundation now. Tully Foot's in the back. I notice does a great job for the whole community. We owe a great debt of gratitude to all the companies that make these wonderful cell phones that we all carry, because processors are getting cheaper and cheaper, and memory and sensors. And then sensors out of the video game industry. One of the things you notice about robotics is that we're kind of the poor stepchild of all the other industries because they all have a lot more volume until robots actually start to become widely used. So we view what we're doing as trying to bring the best of robotics to hotels, for a starter, and to the service industry generally. Something that's cool, innovative, and safe on the one hand, and efficient and productive like you have in factories. How can we bring those efficiencies? How can we help the hotel provide a higher level of service with the staff that they have? And how can we delight the guests at the same time? So this is just a quick video of how it works. There's the front desk talent putting something in the robot and sending it off. By the way, you don't have to pet the robot. It doesn't even have sensors there right now, although we're thinking about it because everybody pets it. And the robot navigates its way down the hallway. We're starting to do, we're tracking the mileage. We've got a robot that runs every night at the Aloft here in Cupertino, and actually this robot. And it drives up and down the halls. It goes to whatever room you tell it to go to. And the interface is really simple. The front desk agent just types in the room number. When the robot arrives at the door, it calls the room. The person says, hello, your delivery has arrived. The person opens the door. The robot detects that the door is opened, opens its lid, take out whatever it is that you asked for, you click on all set, and it actually gives you a chance to rate its performance. And if you give it a 5-star rating, then it does a little happy dance and makes a nice happy whistle. It's funny, we started very much with this notion that we want to be functional, we want to be doing something useful, and let's get the job done and get back and do it again. And we actually had to extend the door interaction because the guests were, when we did some user studies, the guests were saying, well, but wait, I wanted more time with the robot. And so it actually spends time, saying goodbye. And we've been watching the robot as it goes through its paces. And I can tell you, it's sort of like, well, okay, we're still waiting for it to go, but people are enjoying that. And let me give you a couple of examples. We had, I have kids in the audience, so I have to be careful. But you can, this is a true story. The robot went around the corner. We were staying out of sight as we watched it do its delivery, but we can hear, and we hear this adult say, holy shit, like that. But it was an expletive there. And then we watched it go to another room, and this room had a kid in the room. I actually don't know how big he was, but his voice was high-pitched, so I assume he was kind of small. And the mother opened the door, but I heard the kid say, Mom, there's a robot. Oh, my God, there's a robot. Mom, there's a robot. Oh, look, it's opening. What, Mom? And he went on for literally 5 minutes. It was amazing. She sort of extended the interaction. The kid was just going crazy. Mom, there goes the robot. It was priceless. And the one thing I regret is that I don't have a recording of all the interactions now, because I would love to play that back for you if I could get permission. But so that's kind of the simple concept. Build a simple robot, have it do something very, very well, and really simplify the user interaction. Do exactly what you need for that one task, and then extend that over time. So as we do this, we become very good at building a robot that's safe around people, that has good ergonomics. We spend a long time with the size of this robot, and as you can tell, the design, the intended application makes a huge difference, right? If you're intending to scare bad guys, you have a good robot to do that. If you're intending to work around people in an indoor space, you want to be a lot smaller. When we built the PR2 robot, it was about this tall, and it weighed like 400 or 500 pounds. And when it put its arms out, it was a bigger wingspan than I had. And so that robot could be intimidating to a smaller person, right? This robot's designed to be basically not intimidating to any adults and smooth and endearing to people. We spent a lot of time on the industrial design. We designed it so that you could reach over the bin easily and reach in and get out whatever we put inside. And then we also, in the first version of this, we didn't have a locking bin on top. The current version has a locking bin, and the reason is that it's very important. Nice, thank you. It's very important that when you want to do food deliveries, that the food is protected on the way from wherever it was prepared to wherever it's going. Normally, that's implicitly done by the person who's carrying it. You can't like reach onto a server's tray and steal some French fries. Hopefully, they would notice. But if this robot's and you and the robot are the only two people in the elevator, you might think, that smells pretty good, right? And so the locking bin turns out to be really important because, for legal reasons, the hotel's not going to send you food in something that's not locked. We have actually a fairly large payload area, and we've had to actually design around. There's sort of a shallow bin for something like the water bottle, so I don't have to reach way down in there. But you can take that shallow part out, and you have a nice deep bin that you can put in a big towel or maybe even a small pillow. So that's sort of the capacity. And then the autonomous operation, it turns out to be really, really important. If you want to be inside of a human space, you have to deal with a lot of interesting cases. And probably the most interesting interactions come around the elevator. So I'll tell you one other story. This is a true story from last Friday night. I was observing the robot. I was standing back. A little girl and her family got into the elevator, and the robot starts to enter the elevator, and the girl ran up to it. Right in the doorway of the elevator. So the robot does the right thing, which is to stop. Okay. Now the girl's petting its face and so on, and so the robot's standing there. Now that they don't know this, but the robot's holding the elevator door using remote control. So they're not going anywhere, and the kid's doing this thing, and I'm observing. And after a couple, maybe 15 seconds, the mom reaches over and she gently pulls the girl by the shoulders back to the wall, and the robot starts to enter. At which point. At which point the mom lets go of the girl, who then runs back to the robot, starts petting its face again, right in the doorway. Right now it's okay, the robot's holding the door, and now a drunk guy comes up behind who wants to get in the elevator and is frustrated because this robot's in the doorway. And so he kicks the robot, and he kicks it again, and then he shoves it. And so I'm worried, like, what happened here? The robot, to his credit, to my credit, I didn't do anything. Protect my kid. And to his credit, or her, previous conversation, the robot turns around, faces the door like you're supposed to do, releases the door, calls its floor, gets off, and successfully makes the delivery. So survives that one. And I think that's, this is the kind of interaction that is hard to predict, but somehow you have to deal with if you want to put robots around people in real environments and do that over and over. Now, we've done thousands of deliveries, or test deliveries, thousands of runs up and down the elevators at the Cupertino loft. That was the only time I've seen the robot sort of assaulted in any way, but I'm sure it'll happen again. As I said, we're kind of planning to offer a full solution so that it's not yet another technology that hotels have to adopt. And if you've noticed, generally hotels are not big technology adopters. But we found that when you look at something that can create a new experience, that is very valuable to the hotels. And so this is something that we totally underestimated. We focused on, let's make sure that the robot's going to do a good job of delivering. Let's save the hotel money. Let's allow them to deliver more things to rooms, provide a higher level of service, because we observed that, for example, minibars are mostly going away in hotels. Why? Because it's a distributed inventory problem. It's very expensive. They have to send somebody to count how many candy bars you ate. And that's an extremely tedious job and expensive, and that's why you have to pay $4 for every candy bar. Right? The robot lets them basically send you whatever you wanted and make those same sales without having the inventory everywhere. It stays down in the base. So that was the thought, right? It's gonna save them money. It's gonna give them a higher level of service. But the other side of it, delighting the guests, is the one that I underestimated. Right? this is a girl following the robot the other night at the hotel. Just, can't get enough of it. People absolutely, I can't tell you how many people have commented about the value of that no tipping. I'm so happy I can get something delivered and I don't have to tip it. In fact, a loft hotel on the side of the bottler, as it's called, they actually have a sign that says "Tweets appreciated," which is sort of a play on tips appreciated. And they also put this. It's about the size of the robot on the floor in the front lobby, where they basically say snap a selfie, and this is bottler parking, and the robot always basically parks on top of that, and it's right in front of the loft. So you can see that it's a big marketing draw for them. I'm not going to go on for a long time because it's late and I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, but I just want to make one last point, which is making robots meaningful. We're hitting a point where it's time where we can now make robots and put them in the world, right? There's a lot of ethical questions that are already been raised about, are these things safe? Is it, the jobs question was raised. But robots are here, and the question is, can you do something meaningful with them? For us, I was touched when a guy named Henry Evans called me at Willow Garage and said, that robot with 2 arms, can I use that robot to be my external body? Because it turns out Henry had a brainstem stroke a few years ago and can't move his arms and legs anymore and can't speak. And he used the robot to do things like scratch his itch for the first time, right? Just using the robot to do those very, very simple things. He's used the robot to go open up a drawer, get a towel, come back, wipe his face because he has a little drooling problem. This is incredibly important to his dignity. And so when we look at this, we say, making robots meaningful, figuring out a way that, of course, any technology can be used for good or for evil, but finding out the ways that really can be the best uses of technology. And in our case, to start off, empowering the staff, but even more importantly, delighting the guests, is the meaning that we found in this little robot. So with that, let me take any questions you have. So yeah, again, with this kind of keep it simple, send the minimum viable product, the robot delivers one thing, delivers it, and comes back. There's plenty of space inside to think about a drawer system or something much more complicated, but we thought for the beginning, let's deliver something, just make that delivery experience great. And again, you don't see hotels, you don't see a lot of four rooms in a row calling for deliveries at the same time. Almost always when you see a delivery, you see a person carrying that one delivery and going back, right? And that job is mostly riding the elevator, right, and walking the hallways. It's not using that person's brain. It's not using that person's dexterity. It's just basically, mindless walking up and down the halls. And so there's where we have the robot doing something so that the person who's working in the hotel can spend more time interacting with guests. At the Loft in Cupertino, what we see is the front desk talent is the one who would have to go run something up to the room, but then they're not at the front desk. And so you've all had the experience where you go to a hotel late at night and the sign says, be back in 5 minutes, right, because they're running a delivery. Well, now you're tired, you just got there, you have to wait. So you could do the other way. They could say to the person upstairs who's asking for something, well, you'll have to wait half an hour because I've got a line of people here, right? Either way, the service level is lower. Either way, the robot helps you increase the service level and make guests happier. Yes? How does Savioke do the navigation? So similar to the Nightscope robot, it has sensors in the front. It's sensing the environment right in front of it to make sure it avoids obstacles. It's sensing the walls in order to not get lost. So navigation is really made up of 3 parts, right? Don't hit anything and anybody. Don't get lost. And plan a smooth path that's graceful, right? And so we've spent a lot of time on the graceful paths, a lot of time on making sure it doesn't hit anything, and a lot of time on making sure it doesn't get lost. Put all those things together and you have a fundamental capability that allows you to do delivery, it allows you to do escorting, it allows you to do a lot of other things. In fact, when we analyzed mobile robots, they all start with you have to be able to navigate.
What about the positioning system?
The positioning system? You could, yeah, so there's always an engineering trade-off, right? I can put satellite, so you can't use GPS because you're indoors, in our case, but you could go in and put positioning systems throughout the hotel, and it's really would be a cost trade-off, right? I would have to say to the hotel, you have to install all these things on all these floors, and you have to power them, and we try to keep the installation as simple as possible. There's no getting around making the robot use the elevator, and so we have to do something with that to put it on the network. But beyond that and making it so that we can call the phones, which varies from hotel to hotel, those are the installation things. And then we basically make a map, and then the robot goes. Yes?
I was curious, how does it ride the elevator?
Just
Call the elevator.
oh, call the elevator. Yeah, so it calls the elevator over Wi-Fi, and what we do is we connect basically the elevator controller to the network, and we implement an API so that the robot can say, what floor is the elevator on? Can you please come to this floor and hold the door? Right, those three things. Yes?
What is its top speed?
Its top speed is, it could go 1.5 meters per second, which is about a very brisk walk. In practice, we keep it at about 3/4 of a meter per second, which is kind of a slow and steady walk, right? Over time, we may speed it up, but right now we're basically trying to be very conservative and careful. We really don't want it to hit anybody, all right? Yes?
What happens if somebody tries to approach it with their own request? Does it just stop, or does it advise them that it's already on call? Or?
Yeah, so right now it's only showing this, I'm ready to deliver screen, which is what it usually shows in the lobby. But normally while it's going along, it's got the blinky eyes, and it's basically saying, hello, I'm running a delivery, I'm going to the second floor, I'm heading back to the lobby. It on its screen tells you what it's doing. Which actually, let me just follow up on that. One of the things that I get asked all the time is, does it speak? Could it speak? Can it understand you? And the answer is, it's easy to make it speak, right? It has speakers, so therefore you can play sound like any other robot. It's hard to make a robot understand speech in an arbitrary environment, right? And you could be in the lobby of the hotel where there's all kinds of music going on. Actually, at the loft, the elevators are particularly loud. And so if you start speaking to people, they start speaking back. And when they start speaking back and you don't respond appropriately, you look stupid. So we tried very hard to set the bar low in terms of expectations for the robot and then overachieve them, as opposed to setting the bar high, which is implicit when you start speaking, and then underachieving the results. Yes?
So if you went to another hotel, how much time does it take does your staff take to go out and set this up for a new hotel?
So the question is, for a new hotel, how long does it take to set up? And the answer is it takes a couple of days between setting it up and testing. Once you have the elevator upgraded, and we can't do the elevator because only the elevator companies are allowed to go in the elevator room. So scheduling the elevator company is about a month, and then it's a day or two to get the rest of it up and running. Yeah. Yes?
In an emergency situation, can it detect that situation and move out the way?
Yeah, so, well, it depends what you mean. There's lots of emergency situations. A very common emergency situation that we all plan for is fire alarms going off. And it turns out that the elevator guys always give us a signal that there's a fire. Like if they get a fire signal to the elevator, the elevators will do certain behavior. But since we're connected to the elevators, they also give us the signal that the fire is going on, at which point we'll initiate a different behavior, which is basically get out of the elevator, stop calling the elevator, get out of the way, and eventually we're going to add emergency lights, basically just, light, because if you have a fire, you may have decrease in power or something else. So we'll add emergency lighting as well. Yes?
So how do you reliably find the correct room to go to if you don't have external positioning, things like outdoors or something?
No, so the question is, how do we reliably find out what door to go to? The answer is we do something called localization. Localization is, there's an algorithm in the robotics world called SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping. We're not simultaneously mapping. We build a map up front, but we're constantly localizing, which means we're watching how many times the wheels go around, we're counting the distance we went, and then we're looking at all the features of the environment, like the walls and the corners and the doors, and we're using that to adjust those estimates so that we don't have drift over time. And then because we have a pretty good idea of where we are within the hotel, we've already gone through, and when we build the map, we label the map. And the label of the map says, room 405, you should stand here on the map, this XY position facing this direction. We do that for every room. Actually, we do that for all the rooms on like the second floor, and then usually the third, fourth, fifth, sixth are all the copies going up, and then the top floor is usually different. So we end up having to do it for the lobby and the top floor, and then once for all the middle floors. Yes? How do we map it? So we drive this around with a joystick. And the sensors are blazing, so to speak, and it basically is measuring all the walls, and it's measuring its wheels. And so by the time you get done driving around, it's built a map. And then we basically look at the map, make sure we didn't, like if somebody stood still while we were mapping, they would show up in the map, so we'll erase them. Not literally, I mean just the map remnants. Yeah, this is, no, I'm kidding. You should stay at the Loft in Cupertino. That's where we've got one right now. We're in the pilot program. We're going into a second hotel that we'll announce hopefully in the next few weeks. And we're kind of gradually increasing the hotels that we're in. But right now, the Loft in Cupertino is where it is. Yes?
Do you have an idea of how your distribution model is going to work? Is it going to be as a service like the...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we're going to do a service distribution model, at least initially, and the nice thing about the hotel industry is that it's segmented into brands, and so you can kind of sell to a brand, and then they all kind of get the word that this becomes a brand standard. There's a question over here? No. How does the cost work? So it has to. I mean, any robot, unless it's going into a dangerous situation where really you can't put a person, or you shouldn't put a person, like in a nuclear facility or something, unless you're going to do one of those kind of jobs, it has to come in less expensive than human labor, right? And so this one's, we haven't announced the pricing yet, but it'll come in less expensive than human labor. And actually, because it's 24/7, it's sort of the same argument as with Nightscope. It'll come in a lot cheaper. But we don't look at it as purely like replacing labor. We really look at it as allowing a hotel chain to increase the service level for a small incremental fee. And that, basically that will allow them to compete in one way or another. So, I mean, hotels will use it in different ways, but I think that, it's not always the case that robots are just going to come in and replace people. This robot, as I said, can't do everything a person can do. Obviously, it doesn't have arms, it doesn't have fingers, it doesn't have much of a brain. It's got a computer inside. But it's going to be very reliable. It's never going to get caught. Its car's not going to break down on the way to work, right? It's not going to get, it's not going to have a hangover on Monday morning. It's going to be, work the same basically day in and day out. And that's a valuable thing for the company. Anything over this side? Yes, one back there. So there is actually, there's a company that we saw that is actually doing a kind of a larger vacuum cleaner device. No, we haven't really thought about making this into a vacuum, although I can't tell you how many guests say, what is it? Oh, is it like a really big vacuum? And say, no, it does delivery, but that's a new thing, so that's not what people think of. I think actually a lot of people compare it to R2-D2, and I think you have this, when I was a kid, that was the thing, R2-D2 and C-3PO. And you have sort of both views represented here, right? You have humanoids, you have the kind of smaller robots that are more direct function. I think there's room for a lot of different types of robots in the world. And I think we're going to see over the next 5 or 10 years a lot of different robots coming out. But they're all going to have to share some common capabilities. If they're going to be around people, they have to be safe, right? The whole reason robots have mainly provided productivity in factories is because in factories it's okay to put a fence up and leave the robot behind the fence. That's really not okay in a hotel, right? You can't really put a fence around the robot and have it actually go do deliveries. There actually is one robot in hotels in New York, was a novelty, was an industrial robot arm, and they put it behind a big glass wall, which is effectively a fence, so nobody can get near it, right? So you have this ability to build robots, but I think what's really interesting now is that we're learning, in the 21st century, how to build robots that can be around people, as opposed to, in the 20th century, we had robots for 40 years in the 20th century, but they were almost all behind cages. And that was because of safety. Last question.
So you've got storage in there. Can it be heated and cooled storage as well, or would that draw too much power?
Actually, one of the cool things we've been thinking about is in the current design, we have an i7 processor in there, and so it naturally heats the bin. So but actually, everything is simply a battery trade-off, right? And what's surprising about robots is how much power the computer takes versus the wheels. And so you can have a robot, if you're going to have a robot sit idle for a long time, it only uses a lot less battery if you think to turn the computer down, because it does actually take computers take a lot of power today, right? And one of the nice things about cell phone processors is that they're designed not to be waste too much power, because they need to be in your pocket. For one, you don't want all that heat, although mine gets hot, and also because you basically want it to run all day. And so over time, we won't have that exact issue. But yeah, for right now, we actually could heat the food. Yeah. Well, thank you all very much for coming. Yeah.